Energy prices are on the rise according to the Australian media. The issue is that so-called standing offer electricity supply tariffs are rising across the country. But what exactly are they? Some commentators are singling out increasing penetration of renewable energy as the cause of the problem. Is this correct? What are the main drivers for electricity prices for consumers? We are going to explore answers to these questions in today's episode. In doing so, we're going to examine how Australia's national electricity market works. The market has both a physical system and a financially settled market. These features make it similar to electricity systems in a lot of countries. So this video will be of interest beyond Australia as well. Welcome to Climate Mundial's Energy and Climate Weekly. This is a channel dedicated to providing information about energy and environmental markets and policies from around the world. These videos are designed for anyone who is interested. They are suitable for business people and policymakers. They will also help everyday citizens who hear about these topics, perhaps in the media, but want to know more information. I am Dr. Daniel Rossetto, the host of the channel. I've worked in the energy and environmental markets for over 2 decades. Before we get started, if you like these videos, be sure to click like and subscribe. Share with your colleagues, family and friends. This is a fantastic way to support the channel. It will really help me to make the videos that you want to see. To begin, I want to share a couple of fundamentals about energy and power. These fundamentals are important for some of the concepts we're going to discuss in the video. You may have noticed at the beginning I referred to electricity bills, not power bills, as many like to say. That is because energy and power are quite different. They are terms taken from science, but people often use them differently in day-to-day conversation. But it is important we understand them in the same way. So let's take a closer look at it. Energy represents work done. Energy can be converted from one form to another. Electricity or electrical energy is one form. As an example, we can convert the chemical energy in a fuel, like oil, into electrical energy. We can also convert the potential energy of a stored body of water into electrical energy. We generally measure energy units in megawatt hours or joules. Power, on the other hand, represents the rate at which work is done. In that way, it's like the term horsepower, with which many of you will be familiar. In the context of an electricity market, power also means capacity. In electricity, when we refer to demand, we are talking about power in megawatts, and not consumption of energy in megawatt hours. So let's be crystal clear about that. In electricity, demand refers to the instantaneous power draw in megawatts. It is not like the economic use of the word demand, which could of course refer to consumption. We generally measure power and capacity in units like kilowatts or megawatts. For those interested in conversions, a watt is equal to 1 joule per second. So there are 3.6 million joules, or 3.6 megajoules in a kilowatt hour, because there are 3,600 seconds in 1 hour. Let's keep these meanings and units in mind as we go through the rest of the video. Like any interconnected electricity system, Australia has a physical electricity market. This is a system of electricity generators, very often located a long way from people, connected to high voltage transmission lines. The generators can deploy thermal conversion technologies like those using fuels such as coal or gas. They can also use renewable technologies like hydro, solar, biomass, or wind. Transmission happens at high voltage because this can reduce the amount of electricity losses occurring across the lines. Transmission lines then take the electricity to substations that are closer to the load or consumption centres. That is, the people and businesses who need to use the electricity. Substations then reduce the voltage for safety reasons, but this increases the current of the electricity, meaning that potential losses on the lines rise. However, because the distances are now reduced, this is still considered to be an efficient way to transport electricity. Finally, electrical distribution lines then take the energy to transformers where it becomes suitable to supply homes and businesses. Nowadays, some consumers have solar panels and other generation on site. This is called embedded generation. So, from a physical perspective, this is an electricity system. It's quite a universal way of doing things, so you will see systems like this all over the world. This diagram shows how Australia's national electricity market looks, covering much of the southeastern and northeastern parts of Australia. It connects consumers with generators in Australian states and territories like Queensland, New South Wales, the Australian Capital Territory, Victoria, and South Australia. For the purposes of today, we are focused on the National Electricity Market, or NEM, as it is called. There are other significant markets in Western Australia and the Northern Territory, though they are not connected to the NEM. Across the market, there is a whole range of connected electricity generation. According to this chart from the Australian Energy Market Operator, coal-fired generation still supplies over half of all electricity consumed on the market. Renewables like solar, wind, and biomass are increasing in share. Gas-fired thermal generation has fallen to just over 5% of total. We will return to the significance of that later on. The highest ever recorded demand, which we remember from before, represents instantaneous demand and is expressed as capacity in megawatts, is just below 40,000 megawatts. Consumption of electricity across the whole market in the year represented here was 181.4 terawatt hours, or 181.4 million megawatt hours. Generation prices in the wholesale market are determined every 5 minutes based on a competitive process. Each generator makes an offer price to the market operator and a quantity in megawatt hours of generation they can contribute. The market operator then considers its forecast load in given areas or nodes of the grid. This is a function of the expected demand in megawatts over the 5 minutes under consideration. The operator then tallies together all the prices and volumes to supply the expected consumption of electricity in megawatt hours for that 5-minute period. The price is set based on the offer of the most expensive generator needed to supply the estimated load. This is called a marginal pricing system. The most expensive generator needed to supply the estimated load is considered to be, in quotes, at the margin. In a market like Australia that has increasing shares of renewable energy, whose output varies according to weather conditions, the marginal generator is very often gas-fired generation. This is because gas-fired electricity generation is what we call fast start plant. its output can be varied very quickly, especially to respond where there are changes in renewable energy output. If the sun does not shine or the wind does not blow, gas-fired generation can be used very effectively to respond quickly. However, gas-fired generation is not used very often in Australia. At the moment, it makes up nearly 14% of total generating capacity in megawatts, but contributes low levels of generation in megawatt hours of around 5%. Gas-fired generation still needs to generate a return on investment. So with low utilization rates, generators must offer higher unit prices in order to do so. With gas often taking up the role of marginal electricity generator in the wholesale market, the combination of these factors can sometimes lead to higher prices overall. This chart shows the kind of volatility in wholesale market prices that exists across the national electricity market. Volatility means when prices change frequently in short periods of time. Each different colored line represents a different state or node of the network. Prices are different in each node because of limits on the capacity of transmission lines linking them together. In other words, there are physical limits on the transmission system that sometimes make it hard for generators in one node to supply load in another. While the general shape of the curves for each node or state are similar, there is a significant variation between them. The volatility arises because of the substantial changes in the amount of electricity needed across the market at different times, and the mix of generators needed to supply that load. The volatility, however, is a very good way of explaining the role of electricity retailers. These firms absorb this wholesale market risk and then provide fixed kilowatt hour or megawatt hour tariffs to customers. Most customers are simply not in a position to monitor the wholesale electricity market all day, nor are they able to schedule their consumption according to when prices are at their lowest. So electricity retailers manage this wholesale market price risk on behalf of the consumer. The fixed tariffs, though, need to be set to cover the periods where wholesale prices are high. This chart also illustrates another important concept. That is, how important international gas markets are to wholesale electricity prices. Some gas produced in Australia can be sold to other countries when converted to liquid form and sent on ships. So domestic prices can become affected by global market conditions. The large spike in 2022 came about because of a perceived global shortage of gas. This followed the application of sanctions on the supply of gas from Russia, particularly to the European market. While the conflict in Ukraine has continued since then, Russia has found alternative ways to supply gas to markets other than Europe, so the overall balance has found a new equilibrium. As a result, the perceived shortage of gas subsided. Gas prices are important for Australia's electricity market. As we saw before, gas generation is fast start and sometimes needed to respond to fluctuations in renewable energy output. This dependence may change as more electrical energy storage facilities are commissioned across Australia. However, for now at least, the penetration rates are quite low, at less than 3% of total capacity. This slide shows electricity generation prices from across the different nodes of the wholesale market. These were taken at 5:10 p.m. on Monday the 17th of March 2025. As you can see, the South Australian node has a market price of below zero, of around -$24. In other words, plants in the South Australian market were paying for the privilege of generating electricity. This could seem like an irrational outcome at first glance. However, the explanation is that in South Australia there is a large share of renewable energy generation plant. These plants also make money through the sale of renewable energy certificates. If they do not generate electricity in megawatt hours, they cannot produce renewable energy certificates during that time. Therefore, in order to keep producing those certificates and making the associated income, there are occasions when it makes sense to pay to generate electricity. Bringing this back to the news that we considered at the beginning of the video, what has all this got to do with the standing offer tariffs in Australia? Standing offers are the retail electricity contracts given to consumers by default if they choose not to obtain a market contract. The specific tariffs are approved by regulators and are based on proposals that are made by the incumbent retailers in each node. Every consumer has the chance to choose a market contract. Only around 7 or 8% of consumers choose not to obtain one. So the thing to note is that these price rises are only going to affect a small percentage of consumers across the market. Additionally, those consumers are not obliged to continue on standing offers and do have the right to choose a different tariff through a market contract. To allow comparison, I have taken some information from an actual market contract in the node of South Australia to compare it with the standing offer in the same node. As we can see, there are substantial savings available for consumers who choose to switch from the standing offer to a market contract. Does that mean then that standing offer prices rising is not such a big problem after all? Well, I'll allow you to make your own mind up on that one. What is particularly interesting here, however, is the relationship between the costs of generation and overall retail prices. Even though standing offer contract price rises are manageable, general market conditions is where attention ought to be focused. As more and more renewable energy comes online, the national electricity market has become more reliant on gas-fired generation to manage situations in which there is variable output. Because these moments of variable output do not happen all that often, the gas-fired generators need to charge higher prices to be able to recover their investments. The net effect is that wholesale prices increase due to the effect of marginal pricing, as we discussed earlier. The benefits of having more renewable energy, like fewer greenhouse gas emissions, are high. So there is definitely a need here to find a balance between increasing renewables, providing enough backup sources of generation to ensure stability, and lowering of wholesale prices. There are no right or wrong answers here, just tradings off. While today we have focused on Australia's national electricity market, the issues raised are of relevance to electricity systems all around the world. After today's video, I hope you feel like you are now in a better position to understand how electricity systems function and what the tradings off are in the financially settled markets to make sure that consumers have reliable and affordable sources of energy. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Climate Mondial's Energy and Climate Weekly. Bye for now.